from the floor. Anyone wishing to address the board of managers on items not on the agenda are free to come forward at this time. See none? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Okay, information and correspondence. Are we satisfied just getting the report on biomanipulation update, or do we want a presentation on that? Should we? I'm looking at you because I know you got.
I read it.
Okay, you said it's no questions. Right. Okay. No one else? All right.
Nope.
And the status update on name change for the city in the city of Plymouth. Brian Sheckleton asked me to request of the attorney to investigate whether there's been a violation of staff policies, somebody appearing on our behalf without the board authorization before the county board in the city of Plymouth. Okay, consent items. There's the minutes of January 28th. Is the only item. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. Managers.
One word to correct on line 128. Will replace the culverts in exchange for conservation easements over approximate land interest, not entrance.
Okay. If there's no objections, the correction will be as noted by the council.
Okay.
All those in favor of the, is there a motion to approve? There was one, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so ordered. Okay, there's no president's report because she's not present. And Manager Calkins, the CAC.
Yeah, the CAC meeting was last night. There were 10 members in attendance. And they discussed a number of items. They discussed the updates to the maps just to see if anybody had any input. I know we had the opportunity to give input on those as well. They had election of officers, and Bill Bushnell was re-elected chair, and Peter Reckelbacher as vice chair, and Jerry Ciardelli and Sliv Carlson were elected as part of their leadership team. So they have 4 people on the leadership team. And then they talked for quite a while about Citizens Advisory Committee involvement at board meetings, which meetings they should attend, how they're gonna do that. And actually, as I was thinking about it, it might be something to consider in that they were interested in knowing what agenda items were going to be in advance, which is not easy to do. But it might be kind of nice in the future to think about rearranging their meeting times such that they would have their meeting after a workshop meeting, so they could talk about things that were discussed at the workshop in time to be able to make comments before it came back at the board meeting. So they talked about those issues. And then the last thing they talked about was upcoming topics for discussion at future meetings. And they're going to continue working on that list, but some of the things that were discussed were the E-grade and water quality program. Comprehensive planning actually is going to be at their next meeting. They wanted some information on the authorities and responsibilities for cities and counties and watershed districts and other water management entities in the state and nationally. And then there was interest in having the Watershed 101 presentation from Lewis at an upcoming meeting again, because because there's a number of new members.
Well, are you recommending that the staff work with the CAC to respond to their request for having their meetings after our workshops?
Not necessarily, but it seems like, based on what they were discussing, and if the board is really interested in having them give comment on things,
Mhm.
that it would work well that way, but they do have their schedule set for the years.
Well, it seems to me that it's a pretty responsible request, and the quality of the work that the CAC is doing, I think, suggests that we respond to their need for information and appropriate feedback from them. Manager Olson.
A point of clarity, were they just talking about setting their own schedule change?
Well, they were mainly talking about how would they assign people to attend meetings, and then they discussed whether or not they needed to attend all 4 meetings each month.
I see.
They talked about that, and so they're just kind of trying to figure out how to make that work.
Okay.
So you're not recommending we do anything?
Not at this time.
Okay. Manager Olson.
Although I'm not on the agenda, I just wanted to say that I have attended 2 meetings so far of the initiative for 6 Mile Creek. One with the City of Victoria, and then another one with the Lakeland Township, and we had very good meetings at both of them. The way we've put our program together with the multiple layers of the interested parties, and government authorities and things like that, and show how we're going to knit that together, sent a really strong message to them, and universally, whether they were a planning individual or the mayor or a city engineer or the township authorities, they all supported it enthusiastically, because they've had a lot of their constituents say, we've seen lots of studying but no work done yet, and now they see this light at the end of the tunnel. So but they like the approach we're doing. They completely agree that that's the way we should go, and they're going to participate on our committees. So those were great meetings.
Terrific, thank you for the report.
I just wanted to mention too that I went to the Highway 169 MnDOT informational meeting for the work they're going to start on 169 between Highway 62 and Highway 55. It's going to start this fall, and they are replacing the bridge at 9 Mile with a causeway, and it's going to be 6 lanes wide, and then they're investigating whether or not and I'm assuming that it will, that the whole highway will become 6 lanes wide. But one thing that came out of that occurred to me is that they're crossing, in that stretch, they're crossing 9 Mile, Minnehaha Creek, and Bassett Creek, plus a bunch of wetlands and other things. And it would seem that when the widening would occur, it would influence potentially the bridge at Minnehaha Creek, which is a culvert and has a lot of issues associated with it. But it would seem like it would be a nice opportunity in the future if the 3 water management organizations had some discussions and were together on that corridor when that happens, which could happen in a couple of years, or it could be longer than that. But I think it would be a nice opportunity for all 3 of those entities to work together to try and improve that corridor from a water perspective.
Sue Whiskers.
Chair Miller, Manager Calkins, I can reach out to Bassett and 9 Mile and make sure we're connected. I was just curious, at the meeting, staff wasn't able to attend, if they indicated that they were pursuing widening through Minnehaha Creek. Preliminary concept alignment side scene had shown no widening or change to the crossing.
They're not for this year, this coming project.
Okay.
But there's a study that's ongoing, which is, I think, due by the end of this year, which is looking into
Long-term?
traffic and
Okay.
longer-term stuff. And I talked to the project manager actually today, because I had some other questions, and he indicated that he wasn't sure when this was going to happen, but it's something that they're definitely looking at, so.
The reason I ask is we were made aware of that and took a preliminary look at it, and we know, based on the recent modeling that we've done, that there are floodplain issues in and around the area, so that's something that we do want to track, and then obviously there's opportunities for connections downstream to target Norwood area and that sort of thing. So just curious what information they rolled out.
Yeah, well, and 9 Mile has approved the causeway. That's been approved by them. But I think if the three entities were together, they would certainly have more impact on the corridor as a whole, I think, when it comes time for that to happen.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the report. Anybody else got anything they want to bring to our attention? If not, the list of upcoming meetings are on the agenda. February 18th, Planning and Policy Committee, February 25th, Board Meeting, March 3rd, Operations and Programs Committee, March 9th, the CAC, and the 10th, the Board Meeting, and the 17th, the Policy and Planning Committee meeting again. Any other meetings that we should know about? Okay. There's no public hearings and no permit requests and action items. Nothing removed from the consent agenda. Item 10.2. Is there any discussion? Is there a motion to approve? I don't think we have to have a discussion about replacing a vehicle, do we?
I was just going to say that I think we should have a training session for all watershed staff to learn how to drive a stick shift.
Yeah. That was bothersome, that in the report, that one of the reasons for getting rid of the 12 or 14-year-old truck was nobody knew how to drive a stick shift.
One person,
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. 10.3.
Chair Miller, managers, the RBA that's before you tonight requests authorization to execute an agreement with KC Consulting to plan and implement the 2016 Minnehaha Creek cleanup. KC Consulting is the event planning firm that we use for this event, and it has grown in scope and impact over the last several years. In 2015, the event spanned 4 cities, Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, and Minnetonka, attracting a record-tying 1,600 people and collecting a record-breaking 4 tons of trash. This request before you tonight is virtually the same as the RBA that was approved for the 2015 creek cleanup, with one notable change. It increases the scope of the request from $12,000 to $16,000. Now, the additional $4,000 that's included in this request is needed to cover the acquisition of supplies and services that are procured in coordination with district staff by the event planning firm. These expenses include, but are not limited to, equipment and supply rentals, things like garbage bags and gloves, other supplies, signage, and permit fees, which are handled by this event planning firm. This will allow us the flexibility needed to ensure that all of these needed supplies and services are acquired for the event. Many times we have needs in the days and weeks leading up to the event which fall outside of our check payment cycle here at the district, and also may exceed my spending limit on the district's credit card. So the funds for KC Consulting's fee as well as these expenses are included in the 2016 communications work plan for the creek cleanup. So staff requests that the board authorize the district administrator to execute an agreement with KC Consulting to plan and implement the 2016 Minnehaha Creek cleanup for an amount not to exceed $16,000, and advance this measure to the consent agenda for the February 25th board meeting.
Any discussion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so ordered.
Doesn't look like the presentation is working.
Before we begin, I want to thank you for the good work you did on the vision, mission, and whatever else we did. You got us going in the right direction, and it was very helpful.
Thank you, Chair Miller. We appreciated Manager Olson's input as well as yours in getting it across the final line. So, there we go.
Okay. And we're on. Chair Miller, managers, the RBA before you is a request to execute an agreement with Himley Rapp to conduct an analysis of the district's outreach activities and to use the findings from that analysis to develop an outreach strategy to mark the 50th anniversary of the district's founding in 2017. Please refer to the redlined version that was distributed before the meeting. It should be there before you. It includes the dollar amount, which was inadvertently left off the RBA that was included in your packet. The $15,000 requested for this activity is included in the 2016 communications work plan. And based on Himley Rapp's prior work with the district, including the 2015 public opinion survey, which will be an important data point in the analysis, staff believes that they are uniquely qualified for this project. So here to explain it in more detail is Senior Director Larry Bauer.
Thank you. So, how you effectively connect with the 300,000 plus residents within the district is something that is very important to your mission and your goals, and communicating to the district, educating the residents. And so to be able to analyze what you're currently doing, look at the resources that are put forth, whether that's from the staff or the dollars that are supporting your presence in the district. We feel that this analysis will be very effective in looking at your outreach, your education, all of your materials, the communication channels, in order to evaluate and make improvements strategically. So the objectives here, we really want to effectively use the resources for in-person engagement specifically, and the analysis will help us to do that. It will identify areas that we can continue to improve on, identify additional areas of opportunity, as well as looking at the strategic plan and highlighting how those activities will improve and support the goals of the district. So the idea here is to set the framework in anticipation of the 50th anniversary. That is a significant milestone and something that the timing is really good to right now look at that, provide the analysis, and prepare a plan for next year's events and outreach. So the analysis itself will look at the matrix of events, and each year you do more than 50 events in the district, all from small to large, from sponsorships, educational outreach, booths, speaking engagements, and all of those channels would be looked at, as well as analyzing the performance of that outreach. So how many people is it reaching? How effective is it in drawing people to those events? Which ones are really the ones that are engaging the most people and helping educate? So there's a lot of research that's been done, including the research report that we did last year. There's audits, there's surveys, there's feedback that's done in each of these events. And so we'll be able to take a look at all of that in aggregate and say what are the most effective things that we're doing, where are some places that we can make improvements, and then we'll identify the gaps and some options with recommendations for going forward. So as we said, the 50th is a significant anniversary. It's something to celebrate. It's something that will generate a lot of excitement. It will generate a lot of news coverage opportunities as well. And so we want to make sure that we use that analysis to be able to plan to increase awareness and engagement, specifically around the goals as we move into the new strategic plan, And so our output would include recommendations and budget in time for the next cycle, for your budgeting cycle, and that will help for the milestone.
One question that comes to mind is, when is our plan going to be ready? And what we should do is try to commingle the celebration and the launching of the plan.
Chair Miller, managers, the deadline for plan adoption is around June of 2017,
Okay.
but the plan should be ready and distributed for comment sort of first quarter 2017. So depending on the timing for this work, I think that might be possible.
Well, it seems to me that we should be celebrating what we've accomplished, but celebrating what we intend to accomplish at the same time. So it seems to be two bangs for a buck.
The 54-word program.
The what?
54-word.
There we go.
The past 50 and the next 50?
Yeah.
Manager Miller and managers, I think that's kind of the intention, and we've already kind of been collecting, as I've had some discussions with you and with others too, about some kind of case study samples and testimonials from our community partners, and using some of the engagement that we've developed in some dynamic and successful partnerships in the last several years to kind of highlight going forward in terms of the communication tools that we'll use for the birthday celebration, the 50th anniversary celebration, as well as the comprehensive plan and just general communications with the community. So all those things will be interwoven.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
So the timeline will be to, once this is approved, we would begin the analysis of all of the data that we have currently, and that should take about 8 weeks to complete. As you know, Himley Rapp has completed approximately 1,000 different research projects, so we're uniquely qualified because of our partnership with you, but also because of our research background. And then the planning for the 50th anniversary would take another 6 to 8 weeks, and that would be May and June of 2016. And so we've broken out the budget based on those individual elements.
So the information that's gathered from this analysis will help us allot our resources strategically and cost effectively throughout the district, and also be able to support that two-track approach in the comp plan. It will identify gaps where they may exist. It will identify areas where maybe we're oversaturated. So we can truly focus on the areas of focus in the comp plan, as well as remain responsive to needs across the district. And so staff requests that the board authorize the district administrator to execute an agreement with Himley Rapp & Company to conduct an analysis of the district's outreach activities and to develop an anniversary strategy for an amount not to exceed $15,000 and advance it to the consent agenda for the February 25th board meeting.
Okay, what's pleasure? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Chair Miller and managers. I'm here seeking approval of Resolution 1609, which contains two scopes under this resolution. One is approving agreement with the U.S. Army Corps on Section 22 planning assistance.
Excuse me, can you pull the
Oh,
microphone?
excuse me. So that first scope is approving the agreement with the U.S. Army Corps, Section 22 Planning Assistance to States Program. And then the second scope of work under this resolution is authorizing a contract with Wank Associates to provide technical assistance on 6 Mile Plan development. So as we all know, 6 Mile has been adopted as a focal priority geography for the district. So we've been working to develop a planning approach in this area that is based on our successes in the Greenway and also modeled after the Community Works program. And sort of the heart of this planning approach is this layering concept, where we begin by developing a comprehensive understanding of the natural resource framework. We then combine this with our partners' identified work, so things like land use, future developments, future infrastructure investments, and any other sort of non-water public or private priorities. We then combine that natural resource framework with the local planning context to put it together and start to identify where partnership opportunities and project opportunities will sort of bubble out. And then sort of the last step is to take those opportunities and develop an investment plan where we're seeking to leverage funds from federal, state, and local sources to then implement that plan. In 6 Mile, there will be both a sort of formal planning process, which will be made up of the policy and technical advisory committees, as well as the sort of informal planning process, which was what made us so successful in the Greenway. So the formal planning process will help us to build local support, develop a common vision with watershed stakeholders, and in the long term, ensure that we have alignment of our plans with local plans and priorities. The informal planning process is more sort of what happens organically as we start to develop relationships with landowners, businesses, just staff in some of these cities, community leaders. And that's how we start to really understand what's happening in real time and sort of seize those project opportunities that might otherwise sort of pass us by. So again, the formal planning process will be holding 4 to 5 committee meetings, both the Policy and Technical Advisory Committee, and we expect to start that in April. We'll convene everyone, present that water framework, and then sort of initiate that layering process. Over the last couple of weeks, Manager Olson, Manager White, and I have been starting to meet with policymakers. We've met with City of Victoria, City of St. Bonifacius, Minnetrista, Laketown Township, and then next week we'll be presenting in front of the Carver County Board. And so far we've gotten really wonderful feedback. People are excited. People are happy to see that we're out there. And I understand Manager Olson provided some feedback on that process. So far things are really moving forward. And tonight, as I request approval on these scopes of work, these together will really facilitate that process and will enable us to get started on layering these factors together. So the first sort of bucket of work here is the U.S. Army Corps scope of work. So by participating in this Section 22 Planning Assistance to States program, we're essentially leveraging $65,000 in federal funds to support this plan development. It's So there are two main objectives. We'll be identifying mitigation and restoration opportunities in 6 Mile with support from the Army Corps. And then we'll also be evaluating opportunities to pursue a district-specific programmatic general permit. And that programmatic general permit really would support our emerging regulatory model, promote more sort of flexibility, and also facilitate faster timelines on permit review. So the first sort of task here is to develop a list of stream and wetland projects that would be likely candidates for federal funds. So by sort of giving them some of our data to analyze through the federal program, they'll be able to identify which opportunities most align with their priorities. They'll also be evaluating current and future water resource and wetland layers to see where land use will exert certain pressure on the resources, and then identify locations that would likely be impacted and also ones that would likely be suitable for mitigation opportunities. And that second task will, again, support that regulatory planning model in addition to providing some more input on management strategies in the subwatershed. So then WENC's work will really dovetail nicely with both the Army Corps scope of work and also, again, will facilitate that layering process, which will ultimately be used to identify implementation opportunities and then leverage that collaboration and external funding. So WENC will be developing a historic water resource layer to map historic hydrology, and then also be assembling all the data that they've really helped us develop over the last several years into a current conditions layer. They'll then work with the Army Corps to translate our existing wetland layer, which is based on the state framework, into the Army Corps format so that it can be evaluated for sort of federal equivalency. They'll also be taking the local plans and policies that will be sort of mining out of the committee process, and will be creating a future conditions layer that will show the relationship between existing resources and then management strategies and the urban environment. And then finally, they'll be partnering with the Army Corps to take those project recommendations for wetlands and streams and sort of integrate it with the district's big picture, and then also help us communicate those outputs from the Army Corps on a local level. So all of this work, again, will integrate really well with the rest of the planning process in 6 Mile. In terms of understanding the natural resource needs, the WENC will be participating in mining that historic data, and then also assembling current conditions, which we will then be able to present to the committees. As we gather the work of others and all the data sets from partner agencies, they'll help us put that in a format that can then be fed into the Army Corps' process. And then finally, as we put it all together, we'll be identifying projects, and then we'll also have projects that are sort of identified and vet through the Corps, and therefore more likely to be eligible for those federal funding opportunities. This is likely, specifically with the WENC scope, this is likely the first of several scopes of work that will be coming before you seeking some planning assistance. Notably, we haven't yet factored in the cost of developing baseline engineering specs for projects that are identified through this planning process, which can cost between $2,000 and $5,000 per project. We also would like to be able to develop visually compelling maps and graphics that can be used both in the committee process, and then ultimately when we produce this plan can be used sort of for external communications. So WENC is providing that data analysis, But we're finding, being able to take that data and elevate it into a really compelling visual that sort of tells a story has been really effective even in our initial committee meetings. So as we start to sort of grapple with the amount of work involved in creating this plan, we are starting to think about how to most sort of cost effectively create those compelling visuals and a really great plan output while still working within the 6 Mile budget. So we have begun to think about hiring a planning assistant as an LTE position, and next week and that position would assist with some of the GIS work and also graphic development. So I would like to discuss that further at next week's Planning and Policy Committee meeting, so can anticipate that coming before you as well.
Manager Brooks.
I just have a question, and it goes back to the Army Corps to-do list. And I think it might be a typo. Is it a general permit?
Yes. Excuse me, Manager Blix. It is not a generation permit.
I was like, I've never heard of such a
general
thing.
permit.
It lasts for exactly 15 years.
Okay.
Yes, we're not committing for that long.
So it's a general permit, and could you just describe for us what that's going to entail us to do?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll defer to District Council on that.
You feel free to take a run,
Okay.
or
Well, I'll
managers.
I'll take a first run. The general permit, essentially what we would do is produce a watershed analysis that would provide some prior identification of mitigation opportunities. And what we would be sort of doing is asking the Army Corps to kind of sign off on our methodology for how we're evaluating mitigation opportunities. And then we would be able to do some of that, some of the permit review in-house where the Army Corps would typically be involved. So Army Corps still has ultimate review authority, but on certain projects, we might be able to sort of handle more of it in-house, I think.
That's a good
And they have the
description.
final say.
Well, they're always going to keep a reopener in any delegation type agreement like that they issue, but basically it identifies a scope of project rather than a specific project or set of projects, that as long as the work is contained within the scope and the review proceeds in accordance with the general permit, and this is a broad concept, this isn't specific, so the district already has a general permit from DNR.
Right.
So there are projects that come forward that are reviewed by the district in its regular regulatory capacity, that then, as long as they comply with the conditions that DNR puts in its permit, and we won't discuss those tonight, but in this case it'll be the Corps', then they will enjoy authorization under the general permit by going to the district, from the district, the DNR, and the Corps. So it's a taxpayer efficiency, it's a project proponent efficiency, it's a time efficiency. The Corps review process, as you all know very well, can be very long, and this does a lot of the work that goes into that kind of review in advance, and then allows the district to finish that work for the most part.
So my question then is, will that only apply to projects within 6 Mile Creek, or will it be all projects within the watershed? So it will be an MCWD total general permit, and how long will it be good for?
Right now, the concept is a 6 Mile specific general permit that'll be based on some of this work and some of the planning work. Certainly probably set a precedent and maybe lay the basis for a broader general permit, but right now it has a focal geography.
I think it's a good opportunity to see how effective it can be on a small scale and consider options long term.
And I have to admit, Manager Blix, I'm not sure what the time frame we're talking about. 5 years?
I don't know what the renewal framework is,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth pointing out, this just does the analysis to prove out
Right.
a proof of concept whereby the Corps and the district could entertain programmatic general permit. So it's going to look at historic wetland locations in this geography, current wetland and water resource locations in this geography, and then look at where are impacts projected to occur and where could mitigation take place on the landscape. And all of that would sort of lay a base for both the district and the Corps to explore how useful a programmatic general permit would be. And it provides the guidance tools and, you know, those inventories so that we could do that local level review that Anna and Michael pointed out. But the devil would be in the details in terms of what a final programmatic general permit would look like. This is just the Corps doing the analysis necessary to even get to that point of having that conversation.
And is there precedent for this with other jurisdictions?
There is precedent. Michael's probably got a better sense of what those are. Say the precedent's fairly limited. There's not a lot of local agencies that have worked their way through the process with the Corps to get to a point where they have a district-wide programmatic general permit. I think we have a pretty good chance given the limited scope and the focus, and that we're putting a lot of local resources into this area anyway. So I like to think our chances are better than most, but I don't know if you've got a read on what the other precedents are
Their managers,
in our
geez.
state.
Yeah, there are some. They tend to be more, the ones that I'm aware of are both in Minnesota and in other states. They tend to be much more single project specific related and related to a specific body of mitigation that a local governmental entity takes under as more of a construction project, and the Corps agreeing in advance to what that will produce as far as wetland, mitigation, wetlands, credits essentially. They don't use that terminology, but so and then as far as general permits go, the Army Corps uses those quite a lot. There's regional general permits that they renew and revise on a fairly regular basis, but those are broader. They're from the Army Corps. The Army Corps still administers them. The idea of the district stepping in to more of that administering the role, that's newer. That's less common, but it's not completely unprecedented.
Well, thank you. I just had not heard of it before, so thank you for the description.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question I was too embarrassed to ask what generational permit was. Figured I'd show my ignorance at somehow or another. Sir, Manager Cox.
A couple of questions. I know it's early in the process, but since the Corps is at least interested in working together on a project in 6 Mile, what are their priorities in general? I mean, granted, they're going to learn things as they go through this analysis process, but what are their primary goals for a project like this?
Manager Calkins, it's a good question. I mean, I think I don't have a strong indication of what specific types of projects they'd be looking at, but I know that their analysis is based on, it's really habitat creation. So they have sort of a formula that they apply to, so with this we'll get sort of projects identified, and then they'll be applying their formula sort of on top of that. That would be sort of through the 206 process. And that is really quantifying habitat units created. So I know that's how they prioritize projects, but in terms of a specific type of project they're looking for, I think they see us as a good local sponsor. We're good at getting work done. We know what our priorities are, and I think a lot of their interest is in working with us on a project.
So their priorities are ecosystem-based rather than hydrologic?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's specific to Section 206. I'm not sure if there are other programs that would apply that might have more of a hydrologic focus, I'm not sure.
I would just add that the Corps' been careful, if you read this scope, to not predetermine a specific programmatic focus, because the Section 22 dollars, they legally can't use those to say, we are going to generate a Section 206 project or a different section project that is not habitat restoration focused. So the planning dollars are going to go into setting up a sub-watershed assessment methodology, and that's where the local work that we're doing with the communities to identify local priorities and our priorities as a watershed district, using WEG's technical assistance, all of our priorities go into how the Corps sets up this sub-watershed assessment methodology. So all of our local information and our priorities get fed to the Corps, and then they run it through a GIS analysis, and they pump out specifically wetland and stream projects that are driven by essentially watershed district priorities, the parameters that we select, drawn from what we know about the subwatershed and what direction we think we're going with E-grade, influenced by other local community priorities. So the next step after that would be to sit down with the folks at St. Paul District and talk about which range of federal programs, all of the projects that we develop out of this process, which federal programs are the projects that have been identified most eligible for. And that could be across a range of different federal agencies, not just the Corps. So this isn't just lining up stream work or habitat work through the Corps' Section 206 rigid methodology. It's really supposed to reflect what our local priorities are and how we see restoration and project implementation work unfolding in this geography based on the partnership with all the local communities.
But they don't have, for example, they don't have a focus on Halstead's Bay and
No.
goals for that. They don't care about that.
This is, if you were to sit down and talk to them and the way it's set up, it's supposed to entirely reflect the local priorities that emerge out of the work that we have done through the diagnostic and the work that we do with the communities. Now, there's a give and take there, because we understand how the subwatershed works and we understand what the local priorities are. And as we give all of that data to the Corps to basically run through a black box, we also want to think about what are the types of projects and what are the cost-benefit criteria the different federal programs look at, so that as projects are developed, we kind of already know that they'll be eligible for funding. But they don't have explicit priorities. They're not focused on Halstead's Bay or a particular water body or a particular corridor.
So then the district is the entity that will be responsible for strategic planning for the whole subwatershed.
That's correct, yeah.
And this is just going to be a piece of that.
This is the opposite of what we did with Painter Creek, where we worked with the Corps, and the Corps did a federal feasibility study, and they said, here is our sort of lens on how we should restore this corridor, and you get 4 major marsh restorations. This is the watershed districts working locally to collect all that local information and understand the science, and then work with them, and they will give us a small subset of stream and wetland projects, and we'll be coming up with other opportunities locally, and then we'll be able to evaluate those for which federal program we want to submit those for. This is not as sort of one-dimensional as going to the Corps of Engineers and saying, we want to enroll in Section 206, which is just limited to habitat restoration. Please give me habitat projects, which is what we did there.
Okay, and the last question is, we're gathering input on priorities from a lot of partners, but the other major one here is the DNR. Does the DNR have priorities that we know of for this subwatershed?
I don't know what those are, but Anna and I just had a conversation this last week about, as part of the planning process where we're engaging the local communities and trying to link up with land use and road planning and development, that we should also be bringing in, because we heard through meetings with the City of St. Bonifacius and Minnetrista, wellhead protection and drinking water, we should be bringing in agencies like Department of Health, Pollution Control Agency, DNR, and understanding what those statewide policies and plans look like, and layering those in just like we are with the core work and the local work. So that's something that we need to start working on.
Thanks.
Any other comments? This is really exciting. I think the quality of the staff work is outstanding on this effort, and as just a member of the board, I really want to thank Manager Olson and President White for participating on behalf of the policymakers on this to make sure that we've got a full understanding of what the commitments are going to be and the ultimate costs, and the outcomes are going to be phenomenal if this is any indication of the quality of the work.
I will say it's been really fun to go into some of these communities with Manager Olson and Manager White, where historically we've had kind of a little bit of a push-pull, and just openly acknowledge that and hear how overwhelmingly positive the response was. The Mayor of Victoria wrapped up the meeting by just saying, you know, this is just a tremendous approach, and when are you going to be at our council meeting for resolution of support?
Terrific.
So, you know, I think that's a pretty favorable response given where we've been in the past with that community.
Since Anna's been here, everything's been...
She turned it all around.
I'll take that.
I would move approval of the staff recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? So ordered.
Thank you.
Item 11.1.
Thank you, managers. So tonight I wanted to discuss a proposal we're trying to develop for a regional watercraft inspection pilot. It's a concept we kind of initially discussed with the Operations and Programs Committee back in early November. The committee was interested in seeing the concept kind of further developed, so I want to discuss that tonight. And we kind of be looking for your support to continue with the development of the pilot and apply for an application for grant funding through the Initiative Foundation AAS grants that would kind of fund this pilot for 3 years, 2016 to 2018. So with that, so here's kind of a map. The key lakes in this pilot would be Lake Zumbra, the ones in orange here, Lake Zumbra, Auburn, and Steiger. These are all located within the Carver Park Reserve, which are Three Rivers Park's launches. They're all very low-use lakes. We've been contracting with Three Rivers the last 3 years to provide about 200 hours of inspection services at each lake, which really isn't much. So these lakes have been left pretty vulnerable to AS introductions, the threat of AS introductions. They're really not cost effective to staff full-time inspectors just because of the low use. So they really do lend themselves well to kind of this regional watercraft inspection approach. And so essentially there would be mandatory inspections for anyone wanting to launch their watercraft at these 3 lakes. They would be required to go to these regional stations, and we're proposing 2 stations which hope provide enough convenience for users. And those 2 stations would be the Lake Minnetonka Regional Park, which Three Rivers already has staff at that park doing inspections and at their gatehouse. That would be inspections only. And then Christmas Lake Public Access would be the other station, and that would be inspections and decontamination. So the kind of interesting thing about this is, you know, inspections are occurring at places where they already occur, although they would be increased staffing hours through the grant, which the goal is to really see what kind of staffing level is appropriate to handle some low-use lakes. So inspections would be moved to existing places already nearby. And I should mention that, the authority to do mandatory inspections is actually in state statute. That is in your, the cover memo in the packet. Nobody has taken advantage of the statute yet and tried a program like this. So we've been working with some of the lead staff at the DNR on developing this. They're really interested in trying something like this and had offered their support in trying to work through a plan that ultimately they could approve. That's still ongoing, but we've come quite a ways with that. And one of the other unique things about these launches are they're all located at parks that have actual operating hours. So they're open from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., which many launches are open 24 hours. So that also lends itself well to this kind of pilot approach. Outside of these park hours, these launches are closed. Now there's no gates at some of these Three Rivers launches, but they do have park hours stated at the entrance. So, like I mentioned, mandatory inspections would occur at these regional stations. We would be utilizing a proof of inspection system to verify that they've received an inspection. Through the grant, we would have kind of periodic staffing at Zumbra, Steiger, and Auburn. These people would be looking for the proof of inspection tags, essentially, and also doing awareness for people in the initial years of the pilot. There would also be enforcement worked in. Three Rivers, we met with Three Rivers. Their police chief is interested in support of the pilot and offered their support to help with some enforcement. They don't have a huge capacity, but they offered assistance to do drive-throughs at the launches, checking for compliance. Another aspect that we would be looking through would be possibly developing a home lake pilot as well for those users who just use Zumbra, Steiger, and Auburn, who would be low-risk users and wouldn't really need to go to the regional station. And then another aspect that's been brought up is possibly looking, beyond just watercraft, but also water equipment like docks and lifts, and developing maybe a pilot system on a small lake like Zumbra, tagging some of this equipment and tracking it. Not really tracking it, but making sure that no new equipment is being put in the lake without some sort of inspection or verification that it's free of invasive species. So we met with Three Rivers, who would certainly be the key partner in this. It's on Tuesday with members of their senior staff. They're really interested in the pilot, and they've mentioned that they're on board as a partner. But the caveat
Has that been evidenced by resolution from their
no.
board
So
or
this is
anything?
their senior staff are offering their support. So they're meeting again next week with more of their senior management group, which involves the superintendent. At that point, they're going to figure out, what their process needs to be with their board, or at what level do they need approval.
Okay, well, for my support, I'd need a resolution from the board of Three Rivers Park District requesting that we develop such a program, number one. Number two, if there's, are the cities involved in this at all? I mean, would they pass resolutions?
Sure.
Because if we get pushback, people taking away people's rights to go any place they want with their boats, we want to make sure that we got some political support.
Certainly. So I guess kind of at this point, we wanted to really check in with you all and get your further support to, continue with, go to the cities, get that support, start the application process with the Initiative Foundation, which we can always back out of, but the timing of that is they need a letter of inquiry soon, and then continue to work with Three Rivers to get those appropriate support, and then certainly come back at that point with a fully developed plan.
Manager Rolls.
And one of the things that is different from what we've done in the past we had a funding opportunity and we didn't have a lot of people reaching up and grabbing for it. And in this case, this program was brought to us by citizens and lake associations. It was kind of thought of and asked if we could design it for them, kind of a thing. And then once we started working on it, getting Three Rivers involved, getting the cities involved, getting the people involved, this has been more of a grassroots effort of everybody wanting to do something, and then having 3 lakes all in the same park area really had a lot of opportunity for us. If this works, and if we don't have the angst that can result with people being disgruntled, it would be a great leadership opportunity on our part to put it all together and show a model that the DNR might be able to use. So this is it's like the exact opposite of how we were approaching it a year and a half ago. So I've had 2 letters of support I got just unsolicited that came in through my email this week. And then you got a letter, I believe, from another lake association that's nearby, not part of this pilot, but nearby that also supported it too. So kudos to you and the team for thinking this through.
So like I mentioned, this is really just a check-in to give further support to continue on and go to the cities. The lake associations, like Bill said, have offered their support. And certainly we would meet with City of Shorewood and City of Victoria as well. So the proposed right now, these numbers are pretty fluid as we're kind of developing some of the logistical aspects of Three Rivers still, but looking at a grant amount probably around $300,000 over 3 years. And as far as our budget in 2016, if we were awarded the grant, we would actually have a reduction in some of these related activities that would be involved in this grant. And then we'd be looking at kind of a similar level for 2017 and 2018. So the Initiative Foundation grant, they require a 50% local match. So about half of that would probably come from us and half from local partners. There's Three Rivers, City of Shorewood, lake associations. And then after the grant ends, of course, we would evaluate the success of the pilot. We need to develop metrics to do that still. Determine partner interest to continue. But one of the main things is, in the grant agreement, there are no obligations to continue. So really it is at, our discretion and their partner discretion on how we want to move forward after the grant would end. But if it's successful and we want to continue, we could look at, efficiencies in the program to reduce costs over time and look at expanding it if it makes sense to other lakes. So, any questions?
What EIS are in those 3 lakes?
Yeah, so all 3 have common carp, Eurasian water milfoil, and curlew pondweed. Kind of varying abundances, but milfoil is more abundant in Steiger and Auburn. Zumbra. Zumbra and Auburn they all have fairly good diversity in native plants still, but milfoil is more abundant in Steiger.
And do we have any, Three Rivers might have it, but do we have any kind of an understanding of what kind of boat traffic these lakes get?
Yeah, so that's been one of the positives from the 200 hours of inspection hours that we've been doing out there for the last 3 years. Zumbra and Steiger each get about 0.35 inspections per hour, which is very low use compared to a lot of lakes. Usually around 1 per hour is kind of a moderate use lake. If in Minnetonka, it's well over 1, 2 to 3 on up. Auburn was slightly higher, like 0.7 inspections per hour. So they're all relatively low use. Zumbra and Steiger are definitely on the very bottom.
And do you know how many of those are canoes, kayaks?
Not offhand, but I haven't analyzed, I guess, the watercraft type. Based on observations being out there, it's usually smaller fishing boats. And I guess there's a water ski club that uses Lake Auburn.
Okay. Given that it's a pilot, and I don't know that that much about how these lakes are used, but I don't think it's wise to exempt any watercraft because it is a pilot. In addition to that, based on the way I fish, I use a canoe a lot and put it into different lakes. So I don't know that there's a good justification to exempt canoes. Kayaks maybe, but even so, I don't think that kayaks should be exempt either. I think we should be looking at it in a more holistic manner.
Sure.
And I think the potential for spreading AIS is maybe not as high with those boats as it is other ones, but I still think it's significant enough that they should be included.
Okay, is that a motion?
Sure.
Second? Okay, I guess we don't have the motion to approve on the table yet, so that my inexperience is chairing committee showing up, but we have to have a motion to approve. I'll move the motion to approve the request and make it clear that a condition of accepting the grants and implementing the program is resolutions of support from the Three Rivers Park District, City of Shorewood, and Victoria, as well as the lake associations.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? I'll just, well, there's amendment. Any discussion about Manager Calkins' amendment to not to take exemptions away from the proposal?
So you want us to vote on the amendment first? Is that what's on the table now?
Got to
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so
Yeah.
why don't you call for that?
Okay. For the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor, saying by saying aye.
No,
Aye.
Opposed, so ordered. Okay, now the main motions before us, which includes the requirement for resolutions of support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so ordered. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good job.
Is there,
Go forth and conquer, I guess.
the administrator's report?
Thank you, Manager Miller and managers. I just have a few brief things to update the Board of Managers on. One is that a few weeks ago I mentioned some pending grants and some positive feedback we had for a Hennepin County Natural Resources Opportunity Grant. That has been followed up by official approval by the County Board of Commissioners from Hennepin County of a $100,000 grant on Tuesday, the 26th of January. So the county has initiated the contract process with the district, and assuming that we get through that process without any hurdles, this program will contribute to the approved funding amount, and it's dedicated to stream and repair and quarter portion of the restoration project at Meadowbrook Golf Course and the project there. Also, just although it's not a district meeting, I think it's maybe on some of your radars and certainly internally on some radars for the Governor's Water Summit is coming up on Saturday, February 27th. I think that runs from 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. It was kind of a sign up online that I think the registration has filled. It's
Filled like the same day.
it's so there's there are a couple of I think it was maybe I don't know Manager Calkins. I think it might have been discussed at the CAC meeting last night too. A couple staff are part of that registration, so I'm not sure how transferable those are, and I'm not sure if managers were registered or not. But we're not exactly sure even
I'll be there.
You'll be there.
Sherry was planning
Oh, good.
to be there.
Good. That's good to hear. So we're not 100% sure of the agenda, but I think it's an important project to participate in and to be part of that process. And then way off into
Can I just say,
yeah.
Madam,
I'm actually doing one of the roundtables.
Oh.
So come to my roundtable, whatever it is. I will look up, I will tell you what.
Well, better we could register then.
Yeah, it's on, I think it's on urban water management, I believe, is my topic.
Good. Good. And then kind of a save the date type thing, the creek cleanup that was mentioned in a resolution for the planning today. I participated in a planning meeting earlier today with some of the local folks at the Minnetonka location that we had last year with St. David's Episcopal Church and St. David's Center, and also with the staff member from the city of Minnetonka, and we're looking at growing that kind of part of the program. So another save the date type thing for Sunday, July 24th, which is the creek cleanup day. So it's about 6 months away. And that's all I had.
Great. Is there any other matters before the board?
Managers, Mr. Chair, there was direction at the beginning to look into the policy matter, and I'm just taking it from that there's concurrence on the board for us to go ahead and do that. With regard to the appearances before Hennepin County
Yeah.
and the city of Plymouth.
Do you need a motion for that request, or?
It's up to the managers. If the managers are concurring, that's good enough for us.
Unless somebody objects to it.
I wasn't here, so I don't even know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the
lake naming.
the lake naming thing?
Right.
Yep.
So what is the direction?
Can you,
Right, the direction to us, Manager Blitz, was to look into whether there had been a violation of policy applicable to staff related to that, either of those two appearances.
I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Just since we're on that topic, I don't know if anybody can answer it or not, but I was really curious at how they were proposing the names would change. It didn't make any sense to me, so it might be interesting to know why it's being proposed the way it is.
Back to what they used to be.
Well, but given that there's a history of names, and like Snyder, for example, is being moved from the one lake to the other one, it seems to me like it's potentially creating more confusion than anything else. Plus, there's one that has a name now that won't have a name then, and it would seem to me that they all should have a name. So I was just curious as to anybody knows why that happened.
A little bit of context is that there is an administrative error that mislabeled these three water bodies at some point about 20-some years ago.
Not by the district.
Not by the district, by the DNR, actually. And so in terms of maintaining accurate data and records for the water bodies within our boundaries, one part of that data is what we call the lakes, and the local residents in the city of Plymouth have always called them by, although it's called a proposed change, it's actually a proposed correction, because the local folks are already calling them those things. And so is the DNR, so the DNR is in favor of this change, but they don't have an administrative lake name correction process. All they have is a lake name change process, so that's kind of the only avenue that is available to go through. So it's more of a correction than a change, to kind of fix an error that has been.
So what is the difference between, what does current mean?
Current is according to the DNR's database, although current, in terms of the signs at the lakes today, is still the old former names that are to be corrected. So they kind of just they did a little bit of shuffle in terms of when they got into a database. And so there's been some confusion, obviously. And so we're just trying to clear up that confusion was the initiative.
So the current is really not the proper term.
Current is the official DNR names are current. So the proposed is to correct them to what they had historically been known as.
Okay, so current means it's what the
Correct.
DNR's names are, but the
Correct.
DNR's names are wrong.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Correct.
is there any further matters? If not, we're adjourned.